Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you probably can't do this, but as it happens, I can. Here, just a moment, let me put on my emulation of expensive fancy equipment headband. This, of course, is the famous Ninja headband for being able to make plugins with, and we can do this. One of these is the hardware EMU 6400 highpass. One of these is the plugin. I would like you to meet ZHighpass. So this has been long coming, but I think it's finally coming together. I had to do a whole bunch of fancy recording and stuff to make this one work. Here's the deal. If I switch over to this, I've got example audio. And that's what I used to do test recordings. Because one of the tricks for this particular piece of gear is that people liked sampling into it and then using the gain control to overload really hard and distort things heavily before running it through those Z-plane filters. And this is the high-pass version of that. I've got access to the second order and the fourth order. What you're hearing here, this is the second order, and that is the real sampler recaptured into Logic at 2496. Nice high quality capture. And the original sample sounds a lot like this. That's because I'm using my samples, my usual drum tracks and stuff, and making the one act and sound like the other. So, how do we get from that to here? Well, there's your biquad filters and your distortions and things like that, and a little input gain, and at the setting that we want, we can do this. So this is the real one. Note that weird crunchiness. And this is the sample. But there's a little bit more because we also have a fourth order version. And that sounds like this. That's the real device. This is why I did the high pass first, is because that's going on in the output of the converters, and that is happening in the actual op amps and stuff. And it's a little trickier than I modeled. It flakes out in ways I didn't quite do, but my take on it is more to take the Airwindows output and make it do essentially the same things, rather than modeling the circuit or copying their code or anything. I didn't have any access to that. But I was able to try to don the sort of magical Airwindows Ninja headband of emulation. And where the original one does this, Well, in the same place, the Airwindows version does this. But more so. Hang on, let me pad the output just a little bit. We do have this output gain. And as you can see, when I compare it directly to the original thing, the Airwindows version is kind of in the zone there. And it will go into that crazy, like, excessively bright area. That's basically what I'm doing as far as getting into the Z-plane modeling, the emu sampler modeling stuff. As you know, I'm sort of saving up all of the money that I get from YouTube directly, as in views, payments from that. And anything that I earn beyond a certain point on the Patreon is all going towards picking up a much fancier retro sampler in hopes of being able to emulate that. But before I got into the band passes and the low passes and stuff that's obviously much more kind of fun to play with, I knew that I had to tackle this really aggressive behavior out of the high pass, because if I could get the high pass to be sort of in the zone, then that will follow through for all future versions, even if they don't have that capacity to go only to the super highs and then distort them really painfully. And let me show you again what the real device did. Yeah, that's the real thing. That's not a plug-in flaking out. That is actually the sampler that we're trying to emulate. And when I go to the Airwindows version, it's not quite the same fry, but it's a version of that kind of thing, where the original one does this. And one thing this does establish is that the level of sort of gain when you crank stuff way up into the highs is pretty comparable. The idea was to make it behave similarly to the real deal. And of course, this is the real deal. Whereas this the plugin. And remember, all of this testing is done with an insanely distorted and overloaded drum track, because that's the best way that I can find out. Like if you were doing a normal, nice, ordinary sample into this, it wouldn't necessarily show you this part, because that's just distorted beyond all recognition, and you wouldn't know that it would do that if you ran ordinary samples into it. One thing I can also show you is that if you don't do that, the sound you get, it's kind of similar to Mackity in that you can go to an input level of 0.1 for basically no distortion and overload. And you push it to get a little more intense, or total meltdown if you want. but you can do the roughly from 0.1 to 0.16 in order to get a nice clean result. And when we do this, hey presto, it's not making horrible crunchy noises, nor does the original unit. But similarly to what the real unit does, like I say, if we push this a little bit, you can swoop it up and get useful results out of it. It's doing something up there. And you can dial in, for instance, let's go back to the emulation of the second order. And with that, I'll go to around 0.5 or so. And then let's push it just until it starts to break up here. Remembering, of course, that the original one, although this is again much more distorted, that crunchiness is there in the original unit. So as far as working with it in plugin form, what you want to do is figure out whether you want it to distort insanely or whether you want to slam the input super hard. I remember saying that it was 0.1 to about 0.16 for regular gain, and I've got it a little louder than that now. And that's around where we start getting crunch out of clipping the internals of the unit. But we can pull it back until it is audible, but not actually blowing things up. And then you've got your Z-plane style high pass that gives you that sort of tone. And then you can roll it up, and it's not making the highs drop out. It makes the highs quite aggressive. This is all because of the way that the gains are balanced and leveled out among different things. And you can push it as far as this and have it be nice and bright and aggressive. Or indeed go to the fourth order for a more exaggerated effect. And there you have it. Oh, but one more thing. See how that says poles down there and it doesn't actually say dry wet or anything? The way these filters are implemented is by every little stage of filtering being its own pole of filtering. So it's dry wet between all of the stages. So what we can do is this. Go from 4 to around 3.5 to maybe around 3 poles to maybe a little bit over 2 poles. But when we go below 0.5, this is the dry wet. As you can see, nothing happening here at all. But if you wanted to take the sound of a regular recording and throw just a little bit of the crunchy, intense, distorted high frequency boost that you'd have using the Z-plane filters on a sampler, you do something like this. And you notice we still have lows because the poles actually is a dry wet below 0.5. So we can get tones like this, which are a combination of raw DAW sound and this emulation of a classic sampler. And that went beyond the audio region. Here we go. Back we go. And there we have a certain amount of lows from the raw input sound and a clearly distorted Z style. I'm going to call it Z style. These are not actually the EMU filters, nor are they exactly emulations. They're copies using my own tools of as close as I could get to the sounds that I heard off of these recordings. Except for the original one can't do this. You can do this, or you can do the raw sound, but it's not necessarily going to be convenient to blend them and then dial the gain back, because the way that I did the gain on the raw sound, which I'll briefly show you like this, the way that I did the gain on that was by taking the sampler, going into its gain trim option, and just throwing boost on it without caring about the distortion. And I threw like 24 dB, and then I threw another 48 dB after that, and just went hog wild with it. I actually have some audio clips earlier that you can hear, which are from earlier captures of the same thing. So yeah, let's see, number 3 and number 4 are a different audio clip, but that's a low pass. And then if I scooch forwards a bit, 3, 4. So this should be a high pass. And that's the real unit high pass in an earlier track. So it does that. And then if we scoot back to where I'm doing the Airwindows version on the loop that I've got on it, you can go from the lows to the highs here, except for that was this 2 order, so, oh no, I've got it on the 2nd order, that's fine. And then if we scoot back again and have a look at a heavy distortion, which is the first pass that I did of this exact sample, so it'll be a little easier to hear what's going on, I think. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Let's do the 4th order this time. And I'll set the sample over to emulate that. And I'm going to be looking for take 14. Bear with me, I got this. So, same drum track. You can actually see this here. This is what it looks like. I'll scooch this down a bit. I should be able to work with it. So, push it over so that I can hit the play. And this would be the real audio of sort of 24 dB a gain and use of the, no, that's the 4th order bandpass. What am I doing? Hang on. I want 12, which is 4th order high pass, and look at that. So, this is the real one again. So we're trying to get into this zone. And we'll do it by going back to our audio clip. Fourth order, that was kind of low, and then back to what we had before, which was, what was it, 14, 12, compared to. And back to the plugin. I'm sorry, this isn't quicker. And yeah. So this is the first in a series of plugins. Here, I'll take off the magic headband there. This is the first in a series of plugins that I'm doing to attempt to model some of these filters that I was asked to do. People were like, please give me a plugin that'll do what the Z-plane filters in your classic EMU samplers like the E6400 Ultra that I got do. And this is sort of my first swing at it. I tackled one of the harder ones because the way that it behaves when it goes into that distortion and goes crazy is pretty tough. But sort of the ballistics of the controls and how it acts around that stuff is kind of the important part. And I've done my level best. I think it worked out fairly well. So for those of you who are waiting for the Z-plane, quote unquote, filters, well, I don't know if I exactly have them. Maybe they're not perfect, but it'll be easier to do the band pass. It'll be easier to do the low pass because they follow the same rules of going to that horrible scrunchy distortion. But the high pass is what really highlights that. The high pass is what really tortures the machine and makes it spit out terrible noises. And so does my plugin spit out terrible noises, but it's not so terrible that you can't make some use of it. So I hope you like it. All this is supported by Patreon. That's what's paying for the acquisition of these samplers and things. And yeah, if you want people to see these videos, you know the deal, like and subscribe and blah, 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 blah. Or you can keep it your own little secret, but that'll just make the acquisition of more samplers happen more slowly. And nobody wants that, right? I'm going to go back into the code mines and be working on probably bandpass this coming Monday, as in tomorrow. And hey, wish me luck. I've got a little bit of a head start on it, and we're going to see what we can do with all of this and see where it takes us. For now, you've got ZHighpass, and I hope ZHighpass works out well for you. It was the best I could do so far, and, you know, if next year I manage to master all manner of other stuff and end up putting out a ZHighpass 2 or something, well, then whatever. But for now, this ought to hold us, and I hope it comes in handy. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.